But anyway, back to the thread that I saw that was retweeted by Marjorie Taylor Greene, complaining about socialism, but actually capitalism. Let's have a look at it. Okay, so BlackRock is buying every single family house they can find, paying 20 to 50% above asking price and outbidding normal home buyers, while corporations, pension funds, and property investment groups buying entire neighbourhoods from out from the middle class. Let's take a look. Homes are popping up on MLS and going under contract within a few hours. BlackRock, among others, are buying up thousands of new homes in entire neighbourhoods. So who is BlackRock? Only the world's largest asset manager and leading proponent of the Great Reset. They're looking to redistribute, get this, $120 trillion, the entire wealth of the world's middle class and poor combined several times over. As an example, 124 new home neighborhood was bought in its entirety in Texas. Average Americans were outbid to the tune of $32 million. Homes sold at an average, if 20% above listing. Now, the entire neighborhood is made up of SFRs, which are single-family rentals. Now, your potential lower to middle-class homeowner is positioned to be a permanent renter. This matters because for the lower middle class owning a home, it is the most major part of any financial success for them, and then also future upward mobility as well. This is wealth redistribution, and it ain't rich people's wealth that's getting redistributed. It is normal American middle class, salt of the earth wealth heading into the hands of world's most powerful entities and individuals, the traditional financial vehicle gone forever. Home equity is the main financial element the middle class family use to build wealth, and BlackRock, a Federal Reserve funded financial institution, is buying up all the houses to make sure that young families cannot build wealth. That's right, Federal Reserve funded financial institute. Let that sink in for a minute. They're using your tax dollars to fund and fuck over the lower middle class, and it's permanent. Number one, not one present administration of bullshit. This is a fundamental reorganization of society. So where does this position the average American in 30 years? And when it's a given that every new neighborhood is to be bought up whole so they can be utilized as SFRs, it is positioned to them as peasants. Being poor cannot be a temporary condition bettered by upward mobility. In the US and other nations, home ownership is often the first and most vital step. This can provide for generational wealth and success, but as permanent guaranteed renters, you're pissing away a lifetime of equity and the chance of mobility. You just become a peasant. The Great Reset is real, it is happening. This will be the greatest transfer of wealth and the greatest consolidation of power in the history of mankind. If they get away with it, and a revolution will be the only cure. It will be awful. Wake up and get active and stop this now. This is warfare, make no doubt about it. Lloyd's Bank in London is doing it, as is every other great financial institute across the world. This must be stopped. It is a greater threat than the slow group of communism, BLM, or anything else you can think of combined. Well, I'm starting to lose touch here now. Monsieur Cultural Husbandry, I don't know what their pronouns are, I don't know whether they're a man or woman. Let me just have a look at their profile. Jeffersonian and constitutionalist. Okay, interesting. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street control $20 billion worth of assets. BlackRock alone has a $10 billion a year surplus. That means with a 5-year, 20% down, they can get mortgages on 130 to 170 homes every year, or they can outright buy 30k new homes a year, just BlackRock. Now imagine every major institute doing this because they are. It can be such a fast-moving action in 30 years maybe of shooting it. They may accomplish feudalism in 15 years. People will say, they can't just piss away money or buying tens of thousands of homes. They are all a loss. Wrong. You and I can't do that. But they're fronted by the Federal Reserve and are financed by an industry of freshly created fiat money. And what's the global reserve currency? Oh yeah, green funny money. So we ask, suppose the banks won't finance new housing, but companies are buying them for way above asking price. Can it last? Well, the banks are controlled by and in bed with the same cabal buying everything up. You think this will be corrected by market forces when it's a financial and political pincher movement pushed by the same cabal that stole the 2020 election? Hid COVID truth, you are fucked. So the red men, interesting, yeah, the red men, it's like, strange how, like, yeah, this is worse than the spectre of communism. It's like, well, okay, right, let's look into this. Let's pull things back. So what it is monopolization. It is a specific desire to monopolize the housing institution in America and probably over here as well, into the hands of essentially private investment firms, asset managers, okay, private equity companies, all these kind of things, right? Because if you've watched Unlearning Economics' response to Philosophy Tube on housing, we understand about how land works in that, and how housing works, and its primary value is its location and the land that you have to use to pay for it. And land is a finite resource, and changing the supply of housing is very difficult because you have to be able to build housing. Now, I've spoken in previous videos about the lack of council housing moving forward is a big issue in the UK because it means people don't have an option against private rentals. Because these have all been sold off by the Thatcher administration, there's no replacements for these. It's only going to get worse and worse. Yeah, I'll pop it in the chat for you. Oh, where's that sweet copy link address? There we go. pop them in the chat for you. So anyway, yeah. So the actual supply is not going to change because the government aren't building any new council housing, and it's secondly not going to change because why would the people who make money off the rentals change the supply? Simple supply-demand economics, right? If you increase the supply, the price goes down. Generally. So, no one's building any new houses. So, and even if they were trying to, the rate at which they get built and the amount of holes you have to jump through to be able to get that means that they're not going to be able to meet demand. So this is close to an inelastic supply. When you have an inelastic supply, it allows for monopolization. So clearly these private equity firms have gone, okay, that makes sense. How about we just monopolize the housing industry, force everyone to rent from us? They'll never sell this, right? This is equity gold. As I've mentioned before on stream, house prices are just continuing to rise and rise and rise, both because of the natural state of what's happening within the housing market and also specifically pushed by neoliberal policy as well, right? They're never going to lose money. Why would they sell up? Why should they not monopolize when it's going to be clearly lead them to huge profits moving forward, even if they pay wildly over the odds to do so, sometimes up to 50%? Because, the more they take off the market, the more they take off the buying market, and the more that they control how much the rental price is going to be moving forward, the more they can jack up the price. And they can continue milking the rental money cow over and over again ad infinitum. Unless the public sector takes drastic action, just go out of the way, just build a bunch of houses and change the supply, it's only going to get worse. It's happening right now regardless with private landlords, because at the moment, we have this system where if you're poor, you don't have access to a house anyway because deposits are obscenely high compared to the median wage. And then if you're middle class, you can afford to middle class, right? If you're a higher earner, you get to save up for the deposit, then get the house. Then once you've got the initial investment into the private equity, you can then look at divesting and having more properties within your portfolio and then rent those out to get an extra revenue stream. And that's how, you use that to fund your pension, use that to fund, to be able to supplement your existing income, right, at the expense of the lower class. So it's already kind of happening currently where you have a landlord class and a renter class, right? But this is one step further. It takes away that middle section, where previously there was at least some kind of middle class landlord class going on, right? That gets taken away as well. In which case you've just got a huge private equity firms who control the vast majority of the housing and people who have forced to rent from them. And as this thread, I think, very succinctly put it, is neo-feudalism. It is the enclosure of property. It's forcing everybody to be at the point at which, you have to rent off of one of these scumfuck private equity firms, or you're fucked. I know, I understand. I think this thread is correct in pointing out that there was a problem with the Federal Reserve. I posted about a Richard Wolff clip about it on TikTok before, where the Federal Reserve is essentially shitting money out to these companies, little to no interest, right? So they can do this with impunity anyway with Federal Reserve money. But you look at that, BlackRock had $10 billion surplus. They don't need Federal Reserve money to do this, right? This isn't a problem with cronyism, although cronyism is certainly a bad thing that is happening within this particular thing. But even if there wasn't cronyism, it could still happen due to the nature of the inelastic supply in the housing market, right? They could still go, well, I'm just going to spend all this money, and then it's just going to eventually gain in value because that's just what the housing market does because of the inelastic nature of the supply, right? They could just do this without the Federal Reserve, but the Federal Reserve is still shitting fiat money into the pockets of these large corporations to buy so many different, to buy all of these different properties, right? And then they're also using Federal Reserve money for stock buybacks as well, which pushes up their existing stock value even further. So here's about how all this Federal Reserve money only going towards, huge corporations is continuing the inequalities of capitalism. And I think he's right, and they definitely should stop. But it's to say that this is a problem with anything other than the nature of anything other than the nature of unregulated markets it's just you're burying your head in the sand. This is the end result of capitalism, and it will continue to happen. People are pissed off at landlords now. Plenty of us are. It's going to get even worse when their landlord is just some monopolistic private equity firm, right? It's going to get worse. And he probably said, right, probably will end up with revolution. And that's why, and this is why phrases like "Make America Great Again" were so good at pulling in voters, because people understand people understand from a visceral level that they've lost something. The world that they knew decades ago is gone. It's fucked. It's finished. You can't survive on a single income anymore as a family. Everybody has to work. There's no traditional family unit anymore. There's the traditional home-owning unit that you previously did, that's going away as well. Or it's gone for millennials, but it's going away for everybody else now too, right? All this stuff, it's gone. It's disappeared, and people are angry, and people are upset. They want their idyllic life that they were promised by the American dream back. Newsflash, fuckers, it's gone forever, and it's the fault of capitalism, or specifically neoliberal capitalism in this particular instance. Although I do believe that through the cultural hegemony of that exists within capitalism would necessitate being people drawn towards neoliberal capitalism specifically. So I don't think that it's any kind of, there's no specific point in time where someone's deliberately tried to take this action. Because I actually think that Thatcher, specifically, but maybe Reagan too, didn't really do what they did from some kind of ideological standpoint of, we want the market to be more deregulated to benefit large corporations. I just genuinely thought that she thought that owning things and having a freer market would make people freer. Right? More classical, not a classical libertarian view, but a kind of like a right libertarian view, rather than this ridiculous kind of neoconservative viewpoint that's being kind of pushed now, or neoliberal, neoconservative, two sides of the same coin, I guess. But it's difficult. It's very difficult. But the way we're going to solve this issue without, you can put a band-aid over the top of it by, introducing regulation involved in, how much of these private equity firms can buy up housing, but that's not going to solve the landlord issue. It's not going to solve the fact that there is still a landlord class that's still extracting money from, the rental class as well, which is continuing to grow, even if these particular large private equity firms aren't buying up a bunch of property either and using it to kind of corner the property market to be able to push up prices, right? And create this neo-feudalism. That's still going to happen. We have to at least partially decommodify housing, or have restrictions on the amount of homes people can own. Otherwise, it's only going to get worse, because wealth begets wealth. It continues to trickle in such a way that people will consume more, and it never trickles back down. I'm not a social democrat. I am a socialist. I do believe in the decommodification of housing. But in the absence of revolution, taking taxed and regulated social democratic capitalism with certain decommodified industries and limits on market share of housing, I'll take it. I'll take it of what we have now. I'm not reform and revolution are not diametrically opposed ideas. You can reform now and revolution later if you really want. Maybe it's not going to be. Maybe it makes revolution less likely. I don't know. But even so, right? We can't continue. In this particular paradigm, it's only going to get worse. It's going to get way, way, way worse if we leave it like this without any kind of regulation.